for the to decide if he is comfortable leaving it with appropriate government agencies, given the discussion that we already have?
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Honor, the reason why we didn't specify the name of the appropriate agencies, kasi nga po, time might come na magkaroon ng addition ng mga appropriate agencies na mabigyan ng responsibility para sa training, and at the same time baka yung mga agencies na i-mention natin dito later on ay maalis na sa listahan at hindi na sila kasali sa mga training na inaalaw. So mas maganda open na lang po yun para kung sakali po merong darating yung time na nawala ang isa sa kanila o nadagdagan, at least hindi natin dito na specify at hindi na po kailangan tayo gagawa ng adjustment. Your Honor. Kasi, if I may explain further, Mr. President, Your Honor, halimbawa, nilagay natin Marina, who knows later on, down the line, after a year or two, or after a few years, yung Marina ay mawawala na for whatever reason, at hindi na sila ang designated na agency para sa paggawa ng training, etc. Then, kung ilalagay natin dito, paano na yon? So, another adjustment we're gonna make dito sa bill natin. If we specify Marina, just an example, Mr. President, Your Honor. Whereas if we leave it open, then kahit na mawala Marina, kahit na mawala yung CHED or any other agencies, at least we don't need to make an adjustment because we left it open. Mr. President, Your Honor.
Well, normally, Your Honor, if a function of one agency will be removed and by legislation, normally it would be substituted by the proper authority. But on that note, as I said, it is the choice of the sponsor if he will. So there's nothing to do, Your Honor. I have no amendment on the floor. We can move on.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam, Your Honor. Thank you po.
Thank you, Your Honor. My next question is on hours of, my next amendment, possible amendment, is on page 18, section 29, hours of work and hours of rest. But again, with the sponsor's permission, I need to ask a question before I make an amendment. May I proceed?
Yes, Mr. President, Your Honor.
Yes. I note that this law, this bill, applies to both ships that are Philippine-owned and foreign-owned. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President, Your Honor.
And that would include ships that are plying just within Philippine territories, Philippine territorial waters. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So, there are, in fact, different hours of work and hours of rest for seafarers compared to the regular hours in the labor code, no? That seems to be my impression.
I beg your pardon, Your Honor?
It appears to me that the hours of work and the hours of rest of the seafarers are different from the hours of work and the hours of rest under the labor code.
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
So I will read here. It states here that a seafarer's normal work will be 8 hours a day with 1 rest day per week. If the seafarer is required to work beyond 8 hours, the maximum hours of work shall not exceed 14 hours in any 24-hour and 72 hours in any 7-day period. I'm not aware that this exists in the labor code. I am not certain, though, because I am not a labor law practitioner. But am I correct, or is it the same? Meron? Exactly the same?
This is stated in section 16.
Okay.
I never.
It is stated in section 20, 61, Your Honor, in this bill, the hours of work and hours of rest, the provision of Section 29 shall also apply to domestic seafarers. In addition, waiting time shall not be considered as compensable working time if the domestic seafarer is completely relieved from duty and can use the time effectively for one's own purposes. So that means that, yes, Your Honor, it also applies to domestic seafarers.
Yes. What His Honor is saying is Section 29 applies to domestic seafarers. But my question was, that was one of my questions. My other question was, are these hours of work identical or similar to the labor code provisions?
No, because it's not the labor code, but it's Department Order 129.
It is not in the labor code, Mr. President, Your Honor, but it's in the Department Order number 129, series of 2013, under the Department of Labor for Employment. Rules and regulations governing the employment and working conditions of seafarers on board ships engaged in domestic shipping. So, ibig sabihin, yung basis po nito ay sa Department Order number 129.
Okay. So wala man siya sa labor code, there is a basis which is itong department order. Is that correct?
Correct, Your Honor, Department Order 129.
So in other words, kinopya po ito doon. Consistent po ito doon.
Tama po, Mr. President, Your Honor, consistent sa
What
doon.
year po yan?
Ito pong series of Department Order 129, series of 2013, June 17, 2013.
2013, okay.
Yung date
So,
po nito.
ito na ho yung tanong ko that will be the basis of my decision if I will make an amendment. It says here, the minimum hours of rest for every seafarer shall be at least 10 hours in a 24-hour period. In other words, kasi before that, sabi, yung work niya, wag daw mag-exceed ng 14. So if there's 24 hours in a day, yun na nga, 10 hours yung kanyang rest, no? And then it goes on to say the hours of rest are divisible into two periods, one of which will be at least 6 hours in length. So kung yung time niya magpahinga, 10 hours, yung isa doon, kailangan at least 6 hours. So yun na yung minimum na ibibigay sa kanya na rest. And syempre, maliligo pa siya, magbibihis pa siya. So baka yung tulog na lang niya, 5 hours na lang. And science tells us that the average sleep a human should get, more or less, is 7 to 8 hours. So the reason I asked for the basis of this is because it appears based on this bill that talagang pwede palang 5 hours ang tulog lang ng seafarers natin? Yun ho ba talaga ang katanggap-tanggap po ba sa atin yun?
Yan po yung nakalagay sa MLC natin, Your Honor. Anyway, hindi naman 5 hours a day ang pahinga lang niya. Pag i-divide mo yan, pwede namang 1 day, 5 hours lang, and then later, more than 5 hours, hanggang sa ma-reach niya yung certain period na kailangan magkaroon siya ng that number of rest in a 7-day period, Your Honor.
Sir, minimum.
Paano
minimum,
yun? Hindi ko yata naintindihan yun.
Pwede namang tumaas.
Kasi your bill states that kailangan lang siyang mabigyan ng 10 hours. And itong 10 hours can be divided into 2 for so long as may 6 hours. So what I'm saying is, if nagsunod-sunod na araw to or every other day, then possibly yung 6 hours na binigay sa kanya, baka 5 hours lang yung tulog niya. So nag-aalala lang po ako, is that really the standard internationally and are we okay with it? And I apologize that I have to ask that question because I am not an expert po. So pag dinaanan ko to, tapos papayag tayo as a body na ganun ang standards, mabigat po sa akin just stating what I know about science and the need for sleep.
You have a point there, Mr. President and Your Honor, but it is the international standard. It states there. At minimum lang naman po ito.
What do you mean by that, sir? Kasi pwede siyang magtrabaho ng 14. So may iwan lang na pahinga niya is 10. And then pwede siyang i-divide into 2. So 6. Kaya nga sabi ko, mga 5 plus lang ang maiiwan sa kanya. So that is a fact.
24-hour period. Ito po ang nakalagay minimum standard sa MLC, Mr. President, Your Honor, na which we ratified, and I'm talking about the MLC 2006, Mr. President, Your Honor. For the minimum standard as set forth by the MLC, Your Honor.
May sasabihin pa ho kayo or you're saying that that is what is indicated? Yung nakasulat dito sa bill nyo, yun na ho yun? Na nasa MLC? Yun na yun?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Your
and
Honor.
we are a signatory to that. So
And we are
basically,
signatory.
tinanggap na natin yon. Now is not the time for us to question that. Okay, so in that case, Your Honor, wala na akong amendment. I just express my concern na pakahirap talaga din ang buhay ng seafarer, ano?
Opo.
I'll move on, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Doon din sa hours of work and rest, hindi ho ba dumadami na ang seafarers na babae?
Yes, Your Honor.
Oo. And pagka domestic ho yung biyahe nila, how long are they usually on a ship? Or I'm sure it varies, but what are the normal?
Ang domestic kasi, Your Honor, short-term lang po yan, unlike dun sa international na ang biyahe from point A to point B na inaabot ng weeks. So, there's a difference between domestic and international. Like, as we know, pagdating sa domestic, sometimes meron yung biyahe ng barko na 24 hours lang, meron umabot as long as 3 days. But wala po akong alam na barko biyahe dito, inter-island vessels, domestic ships, na umaabot po ng 1 linggo from point A to point B.
Yes, yes. Oo. Thank you. Kasi, Your Honor, may amendment, if at all, to an existing law, which is the Expanded Breastfeeding Promotion Act. This law requires that employers give their female lactating employee time to express their milk. So, kaya ko naitanong na maiksi lang ba yung biyahe niyan? Kasi kung maiksi, pwede nilang i-store yung milk nila and then iuwi pa nila sa baby nila. So, covered naman ba ito ng ating general provisions in our law that requires that Philippine laws are followed? Or would His Honor be of the view that an amendment would be necessary to ensure that that is included?
Are you referring to the domestic shipping?
Domestic, yes, Your Honor. Domestic, yes.
Okay, then Philippine laws would
Governed.
be governed and followed,
Okay.
Your Honor.
Okay, so in that case, Your Honor, no need again for an amendment. I just want to spread into the record that ship owners have to be conscious of this law, the expanded breastfeeding law, which requires that they give their female lactating mothers time to breastfeed.
Yes, yes, Mr. President, Your Honor.
Yes.
You're correct.
And the only discussion I know that His Honor's staff had with my staff was with regards to an earlier question I had on the amendment actually that I made on health status, no? And I understand that there is an issue accepting my amendment. I will make this simple, Your Honor. Again, this is also a law. This is a Philippine policy, no? So I'm spreading it into the record that for domestic travels, that must be followed kasi Philippine law. So I can see His Honor nodding his head. So does that mean that subject to style, my amendment is accepted for domestic seafarers?
Yes,
Or-
Mr.
yes.
President, Your Honor. Yes, I
Thank
accept.
you. Thank you very much. And in the period of, during the BICAM, I ask the indulgence of His Honor because he is the one with the resource persons who are probably in contact, no, with Dole and the like. But we will also ask my own staff to try to connect with them to see how that works internationally. It is not my area of expertise. I do not know about international practice. So hopefully in the period of, during the BICAM, we can get clarity for the international portion.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you very much, Your Honor. Mr. President, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Your Honor, on page 23, page 24 na, page 24, line 11, my amendment is delete the phrase COVID-19 or similar, such that the phrase would read, seafarers who have contracted diseases of international concern or which cause global health emergency. Sa akin lang naman po, kumbaga, medyo tapos na ho yung COVID-19, so it's suffice it to say that any disease of international concern should be covered by this bill, by this provision. No need to mention COVID-19.
That is correct. You're definitely right, Your Honor, and I accept.
Thank you.
Mr. President, Your Honor.
Mr. President, on page 25, section 46, termination of employment, are the again, a preliminary question to determine if there is a need for an amendment. Are the enumerations here, do they need to all happen for employment to cease, or is anyone individually a ground for termination of employment? Because it says here, the employment, blah, 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 shall cease when the seafarers complete their period of contractual service aboard the ship, sign off from the ship, and arrive at the destination. Must all three be complete?
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
So the phrase, this provision, Your Honor, is termination of employment. And under
Yes.
letter A, it says that the employment of the Filipino seafarer shall cease when, and then there are 3 incidents mentioned. Do these 3 have to happen for the termination, for the employment to cease, or is it meant to be an or? For clarity, Your Honor.
You're right, Mr. President, Your Honor. We can use the word or. It doesn't have to be.
Okay. So perhaps, Your Honor, the terminology I will recommend is shall cease when
The seafarers complete the period.
subject to style, no, when any of the following occur. Subject to style.
I accept.
Kasi any or, di ba? Or, di ba? So any of the following occur. All ba or?
I'm sorry. Hindi
It's
ko
all.
narinig. I'm sorry.
Okay. I withdraw.
It should be all,
Okay.
Mr. President, Your Honor.
Okay.
It should be
So,
all. It should all must be completed.
okay, so again, subject to style, when the following, I don't know if you call them conditions, when the following occurs, subject to style, Your Honor, I think that's pretty understandable. It is all, so that is our main concern, all, okay?
If I may I just bang the gavel for the 2 other amendments
wala
that you
ba?
accepted?
Your Honor,
That's
sorry.
okay. We will ask the Secretary to reflect in the records that we had approved all your
Okay.
amendments.
And the last one, subject to style, is when all the conditions happen subject to style. That's
Yes.
for the section 46 on page 25.
I believe the sponsor had accepted.
Yes, Mr. President, Your Honor, I accept. Subject to style, yes.
Accepted and approved.
Infectious ailment or ailment? Oh, Your Honor, on Section 56, this is quarantine and medical expenses in repatriation due to infection, epidemic, ano ba to, with S? Epidemics or pandemic. So, I think subject to style, and I don't know if there's a doctor around, but it doesn't sound right to say infection, so, So if His Honor will agree, my amendment would be to just delete infection because the body of that section actually refers to an epidemic or pandemic. And then, so that's my first amendment. Can we just delete infection, the word infection?
Yes, Mr. President, Your Honor, I accept.
So,
Yes,
thank you.
accepted.
And then, for consistency, what is stated now in the bill is epidemics or pandemic. So can we just be consistent and say both singular or both plural,
That is
subject
correct.
to style?
You're right. It should be singular, Your Honor. Mr. President, Your Honor, delete the S, so it should read epidemic or pandemic, singular.
Sino?
So accepted, Your Honor?
I
Subject to
accept,
style?
Mr. President, Your Honor.
It's accepted and approved.
Okay, Your Honor, I was just informed by my staff that the word infection was inserted in the body, but since His Honor has accepted the amendment to the title, can we just be consistent and delete the word infection in the body?
I accept, Mr.
There being
President,
no
Your Honor.
objection, the amendment's accepted.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's the very last. Ano nga ba to? Yeah. Okay. 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 Your Honor, on page 41, section 79, this is the provision on curriculum committee. It basically it basically says that a curriculum committee shall be formed to periodically assess, etc., etc., etc. My question first, to determine if there's a need for an amendment, is there are no details that I have seen on the creation of this committee. So is this committee part of the Intergovernmental Coordination and Cooperation Council, or is it meant to be a standalone committee? How would His Honor want to treat this committee?
A curriculum committee shall be formed, periodically assessed.
So standalone. Parang baka standalone. Saan yan? Sa section?
Section 79, page 40.
So the same, there.
Yes, po.
So actually, Your Honor, in that section
Your
that
Honor.
I mentioned, it just says that a curriculum committee shall be formed and chaired by CHED with the following as members. So if it is meant to be a standalone, then I have no further amendment, Your Honor. At least we put it on the record that it's standalone, because sometimes baka may umako pa dyan. Baka sabihin nitong Cooperation Council that it's under them, or...
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honor.
So what's the answer? Is it a standalone,
It is a
Mr.
standard.
President?
Standalone.
Okay, so then I don't have... I don't have any more, Your Honor. I just want to put on record that I was one of the first to file this bill. I cannot remember how many years ago. Napagod na rin yata yung staff ko to refile this bill. So may I ask that I be reflected as a co-sponsor, Your Honor? Thank you.
Yes, with the permission of
co-author,
the
and co-author.
sponsor.
Yes,
the permission.
Co-sponsor,
yes, Mr.
co-author.
President, Your Honor.
And also, you have a question? You also? Oh, yes, please.
Mr.
Ma'am,
President, meron pa akong isisingit pala from Senator Coco Pimentel.
Yes.
On page 15, after line 2, insert new
So,
section.
thank you. I'd just like to thank Ma'am Pia. Thank you very much, Madam Pia.
Thank you, Senator Cayetano. Thank you.
Yes, please proceed, Senator Tulfo.